I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I am one of your hosts. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things as Batman Incorporated, Grifter, and Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. Some interesting stuff to talk about DC Comics tonight. It feels like the end of an era, but we'll get to that. My current labor of love is my t-shirt company, KirbyTees.com. You can go check that out over at www.kirbyts.com, and where you could possibly take a look at and maybe think about actually supporting the Retro Rogues Live show by purchasing a t-shirt and helping us out here. We would greatly appreciate your support. But enough about that. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks, hopefully watching or listening at home, some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Hello, everyone. I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am the chief financial officer of a small production company in Arizona called Bad Bob Productions. I'm also the associate producer of a feature film called Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo and is currently streaming for free on Tubi. And I did want to mention today is Veterans Day, and I did want to give a shout out to all of you folks that have served, those of you that had family that served. Just want to give a shout out to them. And I did want to kind of just take a moment to recognize my dad, because he was a veteran and he just recently passed in August. That's a picture of him from the time that he was in the Air Force. So just a shout out to all the veterans today.
And along those lines, thank you for your service, Eric.
Appreciate that. I was in the Navy Reserve, and I am very proud of that. So thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and start off the show just with some house business here, real quick. I think those of you who have been watching the show probably saw over the Halloween sort of season. We did 2 episodes focused on a couple of episodes of the new version of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. Eric and I enjoyed doing those 2 shows. We had a lot of fun with that. And we had discussed the idea of, well, I guess most of you watching don't know this, but Eric and I have been discussing for quite some time the idea of actually doing a second show, actually cutting down on the length of this show to probably about hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere in that vicinity, and actually dedicating some time on a different day for a new show. So we're going to be trying something a little bit different. The Retro Rogues Live Mysteries will actually be starting on this Friday. Now on this show, Eric and I are going to be looking at not just unsolved mysteries, but just all kinds of interesting things, maybe looking at stuff in regards to, UFOs, unidentified flying objects, occult type stuff. Basically kind of like this show to an extent, in that it's anything that kind of piques our interest or we think that you will enjoy discussing. But that will be starting this Friday. And we're going to be doing something a little bit different for those of you that are interested in it. What we're going to do is we are going to stream a pre-recorded show, but you will be able to comment during it. So it's going to be kind of a different thing. So what will happen is the show will be pre-recorded and edited. You'll be able to watch it, but either Eric or I will actually be monitoring it. So we'll be able to put up your comments. We'll be able to respond to comments during the show. It's going to be something a little different, and that will be starting on Friday. So hope everybody will tune in for that. We are going to be talking about the Lady in the Water episode. Was it Lady in the Lake?
Lady in the Lake.
Lady in the Lake. You should have seen how many times. Well, you won't see it, but boy, I've loved that intro so many times that we were recording this earlier in the week. But it's going to be kind of a different format for us. It's something hopefully kind of fun. I know I'm looking forward to it. Eric, are you excited for people to check out the new show, the Retro Rogues Live Mysteries?
Yes, I am. We recorded it on Monday, and it seemed like it went pretty well, especially for our first time out. Again, this will be a pre-recorded show, but it'll be quote unquote broadcasted live, so that if people do want to comment or such, Dave or myself will be monitoring the chat and be able to interact with you and all that stuff. Unfortunately, I won't be there for the premiere. I'm supposed to be in California on Friday. We'll see how that goes, because I'm dealing with all that stuff. And speaking of conspiracies, because we will be talking about conspiracies on this show going forward and things like that on the news show, on the Retro Rogues Live Mysteries. A lot of people are wondering what's going on right now with YouTube down. And it seems like the internet itself is kind of messed up. I was on Twitter just a second ago, and I was having trouble there as well. So that'll be stuff that maybe we can also bring up in future episodes of the Retro Rogues Live Mysteries.
Yes, very cool. Very cool. We're excited for everyone to check that out. And again, that will be debuting on Friday. Now, in addition to this also is going to signal the return of the audio show, the podcast. The audio show is going to be focused on Retro Rogues Live Mysteries. I'm probably going to start by actually renumbering it. I think it'd be fun to actually keep track of the Retro Rogues Live Mystery episodes, like episode 1, episode 2, such on and so forth. But that, again, will also be starting on Friday. So lots of fun things coming up for the Retro Rogues Live Mystery Show. All right.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. It's going to definitely be a good time.
I think it'll be cool. All right. So should we just go ahead and get into our main topic for this evening?
Yeah, I guess let's get to it, right? Let's talk some Mandalorian, right?
Okay, very cool. I've got the show graphic up if you want to switch over. Okay, so we are going to be talking about, here at the top of the show, we are going to be talking about The Mandalorian Season 2, Chapter 10. This episode is called The Passenger. This episode is not without its controversy. It seems like everything has a controversy right now. Everything is controversial. Can we just have fun with one silly little thing without getting quote unquote controversial? But anyhow, there is some controversy surrounding this episode. We're going to get into that here in just a moment. I'm going to read the summary just real quick, which I love how this thing keeps switching over. So for this episode, the summary that's been officially posted on the internet just says the Mandalorian must ferry a passenger with precious cargo on a risky journey. So we're going to start off by talking about our initial impressions. We're not going to get into spoilers until we settle sort of that business. Eric, why don't you go ahead and go first? Because I'm very curious what your initial impressions were of this episode, The Passenger.
Well, I have to say my initial impressions are not that good. I felt kind of like I was watching a little bit of a filler episode where I didn't quite feel like I kind of understood the point of it all and the sort of, overarching plot of the story of the Mandalorian and the child. I have mentioned one thing I actually do like about this show is I do consider it a hybrid show. There are times when it's episodic and there are times when it's serialized. There's definitely a larger story. The larger story, of course, is about the child, trying to find the origins of the child, trying to make the child safe. Right now, to that end, the Mandalorian is looking for allies, specifically for other Mandalorians to help him out. That was established in the previous episode. So that's still going on. That's still what he's trying to do in this episode. Ultimately, is he's still trying to find other Mandalorians, but he has to keep doing these very convoluted things, apparently, to get any information on the Mandalorians. And I did feel that this situation was very convoluted. Like I didn't quite understand what was going on. And as we kind of go into the deep dive, I can be more specific about, specific things where I was like, what is that about? I don't understand what's going on here. It's just, it seems like they were just trying to force him into a situation to give us a bit of a payoff at the end in terms of, visual effects, action, that kind of a thing. But how we got there, to me, felt very contrived. And it felt kind of like I said, for lack of a better term, it felt a lot like a filler episode.
Well, my initial impressions are going to be somewhat similar. I did enjoy the episode. I did not hate it, but I will agree that the last episode, I heard some people some people I know around me anyway, were complaining that episode felt like it was a filler episode and not much happened. No, everyone, no, Virginia, this is a filler episode. There is a filler episode, and that would be this particular episode of The Mandalorian. Now, did that diminish my enjoyment of it? No. Did we learn some interesting things that's going on, quote unquote, with the New Republic and everything? Yes, we did. So did we advance things forward a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. To use a Japanese term, squishy bit, little bit. But it really was very much a filler episode. And it made me wonder, with all the drama that we had heard surrounding what had been going on the set of The Mandalorian, I almost wondered, like, did they do this? Did they shoot this episode like kind of during, like, in and around the lockdown, but before everything? You know what I mean? Like, I just kind of found myself wondering, it's like, was this always intended to be episode 2? Or did they film this episode and they end up having or needing to drop it in because maybe something else they intended to do they couldn't do? I don't know. It's kind of weird because when you look at what's happening in terms of the number of characters and everything that's going on with this is an episode that I would tend to imagine would have been at least a little bit easier to film under some kind of restrictions or something, because the Mandalorian is wearing his helmet the whole time. We have another character in heavy makeup. We've got the child, which is essentially a puppet. And we have a lot of virtual creatures and basically virtual effects, right? And if you notice, everyone's kind of far away from each other. We don't have anyone really getting close to each other. Even when some other characters show up later to kind of help out, they're pretty far away, and they could have been literally filmed not even in the same room and then dropped in. So it made me wonder, looking at this, going, I wonder if they always intended for this to be the second episode, or was this sort of like an outgrowth of a lot of things that were happening, and then we just ended up with this particular episode. Now, again, I didn't hate it, but this is the definition in my mind anyway of a filler episode.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly true. One thing that's interesting is, as far as I understand it, the Mandalorian was completely, the principal photography was done for the Mandalorian prior to any of the lockdowns. In fact, I think they beat it by like a week or two. Like, it was right up to the edge. But this definitely does feel like, hey, you could actually film this in COVID restrictions. You know what I mean? That's a really interesting point, Dave, especially for me, because, as I've mentioned, I'm supposed to be filming this weekend in California, and I'm dealing with all the COVID restrictions right now, and they're a complete pain in the butt. I mean, a complete pain in the butt. It seems like the rules change every week. Sometimes twice in a week, the rules will change. And I just think that's an interesting point that you make, that it does feel like this episode, because the cast is so small also, it does feel a lot like maybe this could have been filmed, in the midst of COVID restrictions or something like that. I hadn't thought of that until you said it, but now that you said it, I'm just like, it does kind of feel that way. It is kind of strange. Another thing that I talked about last week was there were moments in the last episode that I felt like they felt a little TV-ish to me. We kind of talked about how some of the speeder bike effects weren't really working for us in terms of that, in terms of what we're used to. And I did feel that even more with this episode, that I really felt like I was watching a TV show. And part of that was because there were so few characters, there was so little actual, physical interaction, all that kind of stuff. It definitely did feel more like a TV show.
It was kind of strange because compared to the first season, again, I have not disliked these last 2 episodes. Like, this episode starts off really great. I like the whole stuff at the beginning. We're going to get into spoilers here in just a minute. But I really, really liked the stuff at the beginning, and I did have a lot of fun with this episode. But it was interesting because this one and also the last one, these had sort of those moments in it where it felt like, okay, maybe we're pushing the bounds of what we can do, or maybe this is a deliberate choice on purpose. I wasn't really sure, because I know sometimes the things we're pulling inspiration from, I could see where they would sometimes make a deliberate choice to shoot something a certain way, set something up a particular way, in order to have it be an obvious callback to whatever it is that was inspiring these episodes, because we know that they're being inspired sometimes by spaghetti westerns. Obviously, they're inspired by the original Star Wars. But depending upon what they're looking at, and I would tend to think that this episode would share some inspiration actually with Clone Wars, or or even Rebels. Given that these creatures, we've seen them before. So I don't know. And it was weird too, because well, we get into spoilers. I don't want to get into it until we get into the spoilers, but I do have some interesting things I want to bring up in regards to this particular episode. Is there anything else you want to add here, like in sort of the initial reactions before we get into spoilers, or are we good to get into spoilers?
No, I think we're good to get into spoilers. Break it down.
Okay, so this portion we're going to be talking about spoilers for The Mandalorian Chapter 10, The Passenger. Again, remember, this is going to be the spoiler part, so if you haven't seen it and you are still planning to, maybe you might want to just step away for a little bit and then come back when we get into our pop culture news segment. So with this particular episode, there's obviously some things that they are nodding to. I think for me, the biggest single one was Alien. I did feel like that there was some moments in this where very clearly they were pulling some inspiration from Alien. Now, in regards to this episode and sort of hearkening back to things or calling back to things, I was kind of surprised because I picked this image because we'd seen this image in the trailers, right, for the show. And I was really curious what the two of them were going to be looking at. And I had expected, for some reason, I had expected there to be a more obvious callback to the Clone Wars. And I had expected that what they were going to accidentally find was in the Clone Wars, the last several episodes, there's a big dramatic moment that takes place on an ice planet. And there's some really beautiful, poignant kind of shots that kind of answer some questions for those of us that are wondering about how things ended with Ahsoka Tano, how things ended with Anakin, and what happened kind of leading up to where we kind of find Vader when we get to, the original Star Wars movie or episode 4, A New Hope or whatever. So I had expected with this particular moment that I put up here as the screen graphic, that what they were looking at was maybe the remnants of the clone trooper helmets and the rifles in the snow and the Imperial cruiser or whatever, Republic cruiser, whatever it was, that had crashed in those last few episodes. I thought that's what we were going to see. Or I was like, or maybe they were going to see the remnants of the base on Hoth. I was expecting there to be something like that. So what we actually get is like a weird sort of series of events that kind of harken back to Alien. I was kind of taken aback and a little kind of shocked because I wasn't expecting that. What did you think, Eric? I mean, because when we saw these images in the trailer, your imagination kind of begins to fill in the blanks and you begin to wonder, oh, what is going to be happening? What are they looking at, right? Like you're really wondering, what are they looking at? And they're on an ice planet. So my initial thought was, we're going to see the Republic cruiser, whatever they crashed. We're going to see the rifles and the helmets and the snows of all the Clone Wars that died, or they found the remains of the Rebel base on Hoth. Like I was expecting a really interesting sort of thing, right? And I enjoyed what we got, but that's why I would say this is definitely a filler episode, because when I realized what they're looking at, I'm like, okay. So what was your sort of reaction?
Well, it's funny because I didn't have any expectation at all, but now that you go through all that, I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't like this episode because it's like your version sounds so much better, Dave. It sounds like that would have been so much more exciting and so much cooler. I didn't have any anticipation for this episode. In fact, I got misled because IMDb was showing another image from the trailer, which is when they're on a boat. And so I thought that was what's going to happen. In fact, I even talked about that in our review last week because there was no information about this episode at that time. All there was an image in IMDb of that scene of him on the boat, which is in the trailer, where apparently at some point he's going to be on an actual like ocean-going boat, which is kind of interesting because you never see that in Star Wars. So that was my only like anticipation, and then of course it didn't happen. So I kept thinking the only like anticipation I had was I kept thinking, when are they going to get into the water? Is there water on this planet? Like, when are they going to get to the boat? That's what I kept thinking. And so where the episode actually went, I did not expect it to go in that direction. I do agree with you that there's some definite like callbacks to Alien, but I kind of want to go backwards a little bit because again, I was talking about my general impressions that I felt that the whole situation was really contrived, and it was just kind of weird. You know, the beginning scene was cool. You know, we know that there are bounty hunters that are after the Mandalorian. They're after the child. So it's nice to see that they didn't forget about that, because now it kind of puts that out there that at any point, any time, the Mandalorian might just be randomly attacked by somebody who's trying to get the child. You know, which so I like that. So that's kind of cool because that does create a sense of anticipation that at any moment, any time, he might be attacked by somebody just looking to get the child, working for the Imperial Remnant, working for Moff Gideon, perhaps, you know, that kind of a thing. So I like that. I think that's cool because it puts a sense of danger. But that was the first scene. And then after that, that whole sequence is kind of over. And there was some fun in that. I thought there was some fun with that, especially with I guess it's the Jawa that you can actually see his face. And so they actually show what the Jawas look like underneath all that stuff or whatever that is. I mean, and the real Jawas, you know, it's just like a black felt thing with eyes. So how exactly they look like that underneath and you can't see it, I don't know. But sometimes that's one of those things that maybe you try to over explain things a little too much and the payoff doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it was still kind of cool to see what the Jawa supposedly looks like underneath all that stuff. And the sequence with that was kind of fun with the jetpack and everything. And the idea that I did hear some fans talking about kind of getting more of an idea of how the jetpacks work in the Star Wars universe, because you don't see any visible controls, but apparently they have some sort of control panel on their wrist or whatever that they're able to essentially control it wirelessly. It's like a wireless controller, so they control the jetpack that way. So that stuff was fun at the beginning. But remember, I've said it before, I don't like that mechanic character. And that mechanic character really takes me out of the Star Wars world. It's the actor, the actress, her style, and the fact that the directors allow her to be such a contemporary, you know, American girl, basically. That's really off-putting to me, because to me, Star Wars, they always kind of had like a kind of distinctive way people talk that makes you feel like they're not like just like Americans or whatever. Obviously the Imperials usually have British accents, that kind of stuff. So it's like, you know, just the way they talk, the dialogue, all that kind of stuff. To me, it's always kind of giving me this sense of, yes, we're in a different world. This is a different galaxy. It's not just like walking out my door and talking to the mechanic down the street, which is what this lady feels like. She feels like someone that you would talk to walking out of your house and down the street. So it takes me out of it. And then on top of that, you know, we get this very contrived situation that, again, the Mandalorian is trying to find other Mandalorians. She supposedly finds a lead for her and finds this person that just happens to need to go get her eggs fertilized, okay, on a different planet. Apparently hasn't made any arrangement to do this with anybody else. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. It would seem like you could just like hire a barge or something like that to take you to the next planet, because supposedly it's close enough that you only have to use hyperspace. So they can make the voyage with, you know, sublight speed. And, you know, this person, this frog lady, I think that's even what they call her, frog woman or whatever. That's her only description in IMDb. The frog lady, she needs to get her eggs fertilized, and she's the one who knows something about the Mandalorians. She's the one who knows something about the Mandalorians. And so it just felt like a very, very contrived situation. And I was just like, okay, I'm not really buying this right now. You know, this seems kind of silly. So, but of course, you know, a big part of it, you know, is what leads to the controversy of the episode. It was all about those eggs. You know, the eggs were supposed to be kind of like a gag, you know, so it was kind of interesting that they went in that direction, you know, went through all those steps just so we can see Baby Yoda eat some of the eggs.
So yeah, it was like I said, I liked the beginning, the bit with the jetpack and everything. I enjoyed all that. That was a lot of fun. We do meet the frog lady. I have seen some speculation online that some people believe that the lady that runs the spaceport with the Mandalorian keeps bringing, you know, the Razor Crest in when he comes to Tatooine. There are some people that put out some theory videos and stuff that they seem to think that lady might be up to something, that she might not be quote unquote totally trustworthy. And some people believe that she's actually the one that turned the Mandalorian into those bounty hunters, and that's why they knew where to set up to try and actually get the child. So I'm curious to see if eventually we find out that that lady, that there is something, quasi nefarious about her character. Now, beyond that, I think the part of this episode, besides the setup, that I really enjoyed is I enjoyed our brief sort of encounter with the X-Wings, where the Mandalorian is trying to basically get away from the X-Wings. And I like that whole exchange where their ships are kind of side by side and they're on either side of him. He's looking back and forth and they're like, hey, your beacon isn't on, and we begin to get a little sense of what's going on, right? That basically what we had seen in a previous episode of The Mandalorian, that the New Republic is using, was essentially their, I guess you want to call it, wartime assets to try and establish, sort of some sort of semblance of this New Republic or the law, or however you want to look at it, that they are, doing what they can to get this stuff in place. So these X-Wing pilots are kind of like space cops, sort of, right? They're, monitoring this, sort of piece of space or whatever, and, watching for outlaw traffic and such. And so they asked the Mandalorian, you don't have your beacon on, whatever. And then we get this kind of fun chase. And I really enjoyed that, where the Mandalorian's trying to outfly them, and we get all the stuff on the planet and everything. That was a lot of fun. And I enjoyed all that. And then, of course, we get down on the planet. And during the midst of all this, they're doing this bit with the child eating the eggs. And I thought it was kind of funny. I didn't see anything immediately. I mean, I knew it was, within the context of the show, it's definitely wrong because the child shouldn't be doing that. And the Mandalorian is trying to stop him. He doesn't even realize he's doing it, right? But I just thought it was kind of funny. I mean, I didn't see it in the way that some people saw it, because this episode has kind of caused a real controversy for some people. And I keep coming back to the basic fact that, these are aliens. We don't really know what their deal is. How do we not know that, the child's people, if they, maybe they prey on these creatures, like we don't know what their deal is, right? This might be perfectly normal, for the child. We don't know, right? Because we don't know anything really about Yoda's race of people in the first place. So it's kind of hard to know how to take some of this at times, at least for me. But I was kind of shocked at the level of controversy surrounding this. I did enjoy all the stuff with, like I said, the alien callbacks. I thought that stuff was kind of fun. But I kept expecting there to be something a little bit more directly tying into things. And I have come up with another crazy theory that maybe someone has smuggled aboard the Razor Crest, and we just don't know they're there yet. I could be totally wrong. I've been totally wrong on all my
Where'd you
theories
get that
so
from,
far.
Dave? I need to know where you got that from, because I can't see that. Where are you getting that from?
Well, because sometimes in science fiction stories, okay, whenever a ship is damaged, because you have to remember we're calling back to Alien, right? In Alien, there's always the creature or something that's stowed away that no one knows is on board the ship, because the door was left open too long, or something was exposed to space, or whatever else, and something or someone has snuck on board the ship, and we don't even know they're there. And so they sort of use the chaos of the moment in order to basically plant themselves, onto a ship for whatever reason. So I have this just weird theory, because I keep thinking there has to be more of a reason for them to have come to this planet beyond the initial setup of what we're told, that it's just an unfortunate series of events, right? I believe that something else has happened here that we're not aware of the significance of it until later in a few episodes from now, and then the significance of something that's happened in this episode will be revealed. That's what I think.
Well, they have shown that pattern. There's no doubt that they've shown that pattern. I didn't think we were going to see that assassin droid again. I didn't realize that he was, hanging inside the ship in pieces and such. I thought that they just destroyed him and that was it. And so they did actually use that character for something, which was to translate for the Frog Lady, because this was one time where the Mandalorian did not know someone's language, because it seems like he knows everybody's language, but he didn't know the Frog Lady's language. So she was clever enough to get the droid working, at least the voice part of the droid working, so that she could speak through it, which I did find interesting. So I can't totally discount what you just said, because they've shown a tendency to do that, where they do bring back things that you think are kind of irrelevant. Like, I never would have thought anything would be relevant about that droid. I just assumed that they destroyed him. He would said he's junk. I didn't think he was carrying the junk with him, which does beg the question, why is he carrying that with him when he actually does say that it's dangerous, and why are you fooling around with that? So I don't know what that's all about either. But they did have shown that they'll take those threads like that and do something with them later. As far as because there wasn't much payoff there, as far as I'm concerned. He's just basically just being used as a translator. It's kind of like a big earth-shattering thing that, hey, he's still got this junk assassin droid. Now he's a universal translator, because they don't use it in Star Wars. So I took that. But because there are so many people that have been talking about that. What I think is funny is there's always like this if you're going to be outraged about something, be outraged about poor writing, about writing decisions that just don't make a whole lot of sense. And I think what I find kind of disturbing about that whole series of events, and what I think is kind of weird about it, is it's very clear to me that that entire contrivance of this frog lady with the eggs was simply meant to have that funny moment of, Baby Yoda gobbling them. And there's something interesting. They actually had this article come out on Entertainment Weekly, of all things. Entertainment Weekly actually decided to take on this controversy. And I saw this article and I was like, oh, I got to share this because this is interesting. Because what it is they have one of the producers who actually did a Twitter post, and he actually defended the decision. He said, for the record, Chapter 10 of The Mandalorian. I'm sorry, I just messed up my window there. It says, for the record, Chapter 10 of The Mandalorian makes it clear that the frog lady's eggs are unfertilized, like the chicken eggs many of us enjoy. But obviously, chickens aren't sentient beings, and the child eating the eggs is intentionally disturbing for comedic effect. But going beyond that, look at this. You see that?
Yeah,
they've already got
seen
a toy.
that they were.
They've already got a Funko Pop that is Baby Yoda eating the eggs. And so, for me, rather than this sort of, I don't know, maybe. You never know. People are so sensitive these days. Is it faux outrage? Is it real outrage? What are they really upset about? But to me, I just look at the sort of story decision that clearly this entire contrived situation was done simply so we could get this toy. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And I had seen that they had this toy already ready to come out, and it's pretty obvious to me that this was, that they thought this would just be kind of cute and funny, and I don't think anyone expected there to be quite the reaction that there was. I think you dial the hands of time back a little bit, and this would have had a completely different reaction than the one that a lot of people had. You are supposed to know that the child's not supposed to be doing that. But beyond that, I don't think we're supposed to really question it too much more than that. But it just feels like these days that everyone's just kind of really tense about everything. And I guess people got really upset about it. But like I said, I just thought it was kind of funny. I didn't really see I didn't read anything into it other than that because it's just a TV show, right? It's just supposed to be something kind of, fun, diverted entertainment. So
No, there are
I don't
people
know.
that are reading so much into this. It's crazy. We do have some comments from the Rogues Gallery. Jackie's in the house. He said she just finished watching the episode 5 minutes ago. So definitely, Jackie, you can contribute in our spoiler discussion here, and we are talking about the controversy of Baby Yoda and eating those eggs. And then we also have Matthew Matling in the house on YouTube, and he says, "Hey, how's it going?" And it's going good, Matt. In fact, actually, it's going better than I thought because I heard YouTube was down, and we haven't even had a YouTube comment on the show for a long time. For those that don't realize, because people obviously use their, they use their streaming platform of choice. We do a multi-stream. So you may watch us all the time on Facebook. You may watch us on Twitch. You may watch us on Twitter. But we do have Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and a YouTube. We do a multi-stream. And actually, it's kind of funny because today was supposed to be YouTube down. I don't think we've had a YouTube comment in like 2 or 3 weeks with the show. So like 2 or 3 episodes ago was the llast time anyone YouTube comment. YouTube's down and we get a YouTube comment. I just found that interesting. Talking about conspiracies. Hey, that's a plug for our spinoff show, the Retro Rogues Mysteries, So that's something that we could talk about on that show sometime because it is funny how that stuff works. How these how the entire system works on the internet as far as these algorithms that decide how what content you actually see on your feed. That would be a real can of eggs, wouldn't it? There we go.
Yeah, it most definitely would. So there's quite a bit of controversy about the child eating the eggs. Again, I didn't think anything of it other than I thought it was supposed to be funny.
Well,
I
you're
did
big
laugh.
into Funko Pops, though, Dave. Do you want this?
No, it's weird because the Funko Pops I'm still looking at are the same ones I've been looking at pretty much this whole time. I am considering picking up like one for the child and one for the Mandalorian. But I'm going to be honest with you. The thing that has me most intrigued at the moment are those retro style action figures that we talked about last episode. That's the Mandalorian stuff so far that's kind of made me go, oh, that might be kind of fun to have. So those are the ones I'm kind of curious about as far as making a purchase. Other than that, on the Funko Pop side, the only ones I'm really still kind of thinking I want to get and I'm looking at is actually what I'm missing from the Batman movie ones. Because I don't have like the Arnold Schwarzenegger Mr. Freeze yet. I still haven't picked up the Batman Forever ones. Just the ones for Batman specifically from the movies as far as the Funko Pops go. And then on the Star Wars side, besides those retro Mandalorian action figures, the other thing is another thing we talked about on the show. I would not spend the money on it because I just don't have money for like something like that right now. But it would be that prototype white Boba Fett helmet.
I heard a rumor. I heard a
cool.
rumor about that I was thinking about taking in pop culture, but I didn't. I decided not to. So it's fun to talk about here. First of all, there's a rumor that the reason we saw Boba Fett is not because he's relevant to the Mandalorian, but because he's going to get his own show. Did you hear that? There's a rumor that Boba Fett's going to get his own show, which is really interesting. But then the other rumor out there is that when Boba Fett finally does appear in the Mandalorian, they're saying that they're going to use the white armor. He's going to have like new armor, and it's going to be the white armor. And so you're nodding your head. So you did hear about that rumor.
Yes, I did. I'm really curious to see if they decide to go that route or not. I would be totally down for that. I kind of like to see Boba in his other armor, but to actually get to see the classic white armor on the show, you know what I mean? I think that would be a lot of fun too.
Did they establish, because I know Boba Fett appears in Clone Wars, did they establish where Boba Fett actually got his armor from?
As far as I know, and I didn't see all the episodes, because I watched Clone Wars up until a certain point, and then I kind of stopped watching it. And then I watched the new episodes when they made the big push for the Disney Plus, and I was curious, and I really wanted to see how they were going to wrap things up with Darth Maul, and I really wanted to see them explain, why it is that Anakin at no point, and I know why Anakin doesn't ask about Ahsoka and why it's not a thing, but what I'm talking about is I was curious to see how they were going to explain that. We know it's because Ahsoka didn't exist, right? But in hindsight, now it's like, well, how are they gonna explain that? So I went back and watched when Disney Plus was new. I watched those Clone Wars episodes specifically to have some of those questions answered, and I really enjoyed them. Their answers. And
we got some good comments here from the Rogues Gallery. Matthews mentions if Boba does get a show, it will probably be a 1-season deal with up to 6 episodes at the max. I'd be fine with that. I'm fine with a miniseries. I don't need it to be an ongoing thing. In fact, I'm almost feeling like The Mandalorian's already running out of material. I'm just going to put it out there. You know what I mean? So I'm fine with a little miniseries. I wouldn't have any problem with that. Sorry, I'm having some delays here. It says no. In the Clone Wars, they didn't. There was a deleted episode of Boba wearing his armor as he and Cad Bane were in a duel. In other words, he's saying they did not establish how Boba Fett got his armor. And the reason I bring that up is I brought that up in the last episode because, of course, I was all about the reveal of Boba Fett. I'm a big Boba Fett fan. I think The Mandalorian should have been about Boba Fett, and I think in a lot of ways it is. And I like the fact that they're bringing him back. But there was always this rumor before anybody knew who Boba Fett was, before episode 2 came out and they established the origin of Boba Fett, there were all these books and things like that that tried to delve into it. And in the official Star Wars role-playing game, they actually surmised that perhaps Boba Fett was not a Mandalorian at all. He simply found the armor. He was simply wearing the Mandalorian armor. And the interesting thing with that is Jango Fett takes his helmet off all the time. So the question becomes, was he a real Mandalorian or did he simply acquire the armor? Or was he maybe like a disgraced Mandalorian or something like that? But even if Jango Fett was a Mandalorian, that doesn't necessarily mean that Boba Fett is or is not, because he was on his own. So the question becomes, was he actually a real Mandalorian? Where did he acquire the armor? Is he in fact someone who just found the armor, killed a Mandalorian, took his armor? I could see Boba Fett doing that, especially since the armor looks like the armor his dad used to wear. There's lots of scenarios out there that I think, that are interesting in terms of talking about Boba Fett. I think now I'm getting more excited about Boba Fett than I am the Mandalorian.
Well, I am looking forward to obviously having Boba Fett in the Mandalorian more. I am a big Boba Fett fan. And again, like I said, we have to all remember that as far as the Mandalorian is concerned, Boba Fett, at least the Boba Fett we know, is not a Mandalorian. He wasn't ever really a Mandalorian. He is a clone of Jango Fett, who may or may not have been a Mandalorian. We don't know how Jango came across the technology that he uses in the Clone Wars. They didn't really ever, as far as I know, really explain that. It would, again, I wouldn't, and I'd heard that they've explained how Boba Fett got the armor a lot of different ways in the old canon, right? In between the comics and the books and everything, there was all different variations. The one I'd always kind of heard and remembered was the fact that he had basically that he had taken that armor, that he had maybe even had stolen.
Right, that's armor. What I was talking about. Yeah, the idea that he was not a Mandalorian, that he simply took the armor from, possibly killed one or stole it or something like that.
And there could be a really interesting double cross where, maybe our Mandalorian, when Boba says that armor is his, and maybe the Mandalorian might return it to him without ever really fully realizing, that, technically, he was never ever a real Mandalorian, and he might attribute to him like the code and the way and everything that the Mandalorians are supposed to adhere to, when in reality, Boba Fett is a villain. I said that last episode. We shouldn't expect Boba Fett to act any other way than as a villain.
Right.
So
I agree with that 100%. But then again, I also think the Mandalorians themselves, depending, what perspective you're taking, can be regarded as villains. In fact, I do know, even though I wasn't a big Clone Wars guy, I know from Wikipedia that there's a big civil war on Mandalore at the time of the Clone Wars. That's one of the big storylines in the Clone Wars, is that there was a civil war. So the Mandalorians themselves are fractured. They're not unified. They're like clans. You know what I mean? That's kind of the idea, right? And then Matthew does add something that I think is rather obvious, that is fair to point out, which is I could see his armor being Jango Fett's, just painted over. After all, he did take Slave One. And that's a great point. It could just simply be that it's just the modified armor of his father. They're not identical. There are differences between Jango Fett's armor and Boba Fett's armor. But the idea that he kind of reforged it somehow, repainted it, modified it, and it's simply his father's armor, that makes a lot of sense. That makes perfect sense. But then it does beg the question, was Jango Fett an actual Mandalorian or not? Because if you compare it to what we're seeing in the show, there's a big case to say he wasn't, or he was maybe like disgraced, or maybe he left or something like that. You know what I mean? Because again, the face thing, Jango Fett had no problem showing his face to everybody. Interestingly enough, though, Boba Fett doesn't show his face until this episode of The Mandalorian. In the original Star Wars movies, Boba Fett never took his helmet off. So it's kind of interesting when you think about that, but that's also some of the problems I think George Lucas created, because he wasn't very consistent with the whole narrative there.
Well, and I think he wasn't very consistent with it, because I don't think he ever expected Boba Fett to become as popular of a character or villain as
episode 2, he knew that. That's the whole point of having
Jango
Fett.
I mean,
by then,
right.
He absolutely knew. So
right.
I think there were some questionable decisions made there, though, as far as, because I like I've said this a million times. I love the fact that the Mandalorian doesn't take his helmet off. I think that's really cool, because again, that's like the classic Boba Fett. Boba Fett doesn't take his helmet off. Darth Vader doesn't take his helmet off until he dies. And that's a huge thing. That's a big deal. That was a huge deal to us as kids, because I was a kid when Return of the Jedi came out. That was a huge deal to us that you finally got to see him, because he didn't take off his mask. So, that you have all these characters, in Star Wars lore, and all these actors too. I think of how esteemed, David Prowse is, within the fan community, how much Jeremy Bulloch is esteemed within the fan community. Never got to see his face, you know what I mean, as Boba Fett. And that's part of the lore. That's part of the fun. And that's one of the things I think Filoni and Favreau really get. And of course, there's another controversy and rumor out there, is that the actor doesn't get that Pedro Pascal doesn't get that, because he's one of these typical Hollywood actors that he wants to have everybody see his face, every 5 seconds. That's one of my criticisms of so many of the DC and Marvel movies, is that you have these guys that, like, Spider-Man doesn't take his mask off. You know what I mean? Iron Man doesn't take his mask off. It's just silly to me that they constantly do that, in the movies. So to me, the mask is a really important thing. And again, it was as far as the Mandalorian's concerned, it was established by Boba Fett in the movies.
Yeah, we do have some additional comments too coming in, actually from Matthew again over on YouTube. He says the Boba Fett actor in The Mandalorian is actually the actor of Jango Fett. They want to show, since Jango is a clone, Boba is a clone of Jango being his son. Yes, that's Temo Morrison is the actor, and he says, so basically what I mean is they want to show how Boba is a clone of Jango. Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do know they want to do that. But there's also this question of, why Boba is out of his armor, what's going on. We know that he apparently escaped the Sarlacc pit. Did he have to discard his armor for some reason? Did he have to use his armor as barter in order to get transport or something else that he needed, either from the Jawas or someone else, and then the Jawas eventually ended up with the armor? There's a whole story about where we find Boba Fett in that episode as he's watching the Mandalorian on the speeder bike as they're going across the plain or the desert sea or whatever you want to call it. So it is going to be interesting to discover exactly what all Boba Fett has gone through. And in addition to that too, if they even take the time to explain to us exactly where Boba's original armor actually came from, right? or if they just put him in a new version for some reason, and we don't ever really get an explanation. I don't know. It's going to be curious to see how this all kind of works itself out, over time.
And it kind of makes me want to be like, okay, if this frog lady's husband does know where another Mandalorian is, I want to get to the other Mandalorian already. You know what I mean? Like, I already want to figure out what's going on there. I want to see who this other Mandalorian possibly is. If he is a real Mandalorian, they've established that, yes, people do take the Mandalorian armor and run around in it, even though they aren't Mandalorians. So could this be another situation where that's going on? But instead, we kind of just get stuck on this ice planet fighting, space bugs. And so I don't know. Especially what you said, Dave. It's like now I'm kind of, liking the episode even less, because I'm like, wow, that would have been cool if it was Hoth. That would have been cool if it was like this big battlefield from like the days of the Clone Wars or something like that. But that's not what we got.
Well, and that was the thing. They still could have shown us that, even if they still wanted to do the whole alien spider creature thing, because what could have initially got, the child and the Mandalorian's attention, right, or while they went off exploring, could have been that sort of graveyard. And they're sort of like, wow, we're kind of like on hallowed ground. And maybe they're walking around, and then the child finds one of the spider egg things, and we get the aliens call back, I mean, it even could have been over one of them. He could have actually knocked a clone trooper helmet over, and it's underneath, and then the thing kind of jostles and it comes alive, and we get that sort of callback to aliens. There's all different kinds of things that they could have potentially done had they wanted to go that route. I just assumed from the trailer, because this seems like such a dramatic moment, and I was, from the moment I saw it, I really wanted to know, what have they found? Did they find that Republic cruiser, Imperial cruiser, or whatever it was, where Ahsoka essentially escaped her troopers when they turned on her, and basically she crashed spoiler alert for the Clone Wars, she crashes this cruiser on this planet, and basically all the troopers that she served with that turned on her, they all die, and it's this huge mass grave where they've taken the rifles and the helmets and they put them on them, and it's a huge, massive, basically grave site. And then I don't know if you've seen it, Eric, but there's this scene where Vader actually shows up, and it's like he's looking for Ahsoka, and then he sees this, and that's why they figure that Ahsoka has died, because they assume she also died in this crash. And this is also why Vader doesn't have any of the troopers that he actually knew that he served with, because it seems like most of them probably did die in the Clone Wars. That's kind of how they set that idea up, that Vader doesn't have those connections to the Clone Wars anymore for the most part, because pretty much everyone's gone, right? That he had any, kind of tight connection with. That's kind of what they're trying to show us in that scene. It's what makes it so poignant and dramatic. So when I saw this in the trailer, and I know the connection that Filoni has to the Clone Wars, and I know they're wanting to bring everything, closer together because they've got to bring in Ahsoka, that's what I thought was happening, is they were looking for Ahsoka. And when I saw this scene in the trailer, I thought, oh, because there's a wreckage behind them, right? So I assumed that's what this scene was going to be about when they showed us in the episode, is it was a child, and it was the Mandalorian realizing that, wow, something really awful happened here, and then you'd see what remains of this mass grave. And it's because they're looking for Ahsoka. That's what I thought when I saw this in the trailer. So I thought we were going to get. And then I was like, ooh, or it could be cool too. Maybe it's what remains of Hoth for some reason. Like, I don't know. That was my mind. That's what I was imagining. So,
yeah, you imagined some great stuff, Dave. And unfortunately, I don't think the people working for these shows imagine quite on the level that you do. But getting back to some of the Mandalorian stuff, as far as who this next Mandalorian might be, Matt had another comment where he said that I think the Mandalorians that the frog lady's husband claims to have seen were either Bo-Katan and the Night Owls, or even the armor and other Mandalorians Mando grew up with. Because that's a good point too, especially at the end there. I don't know a lot about Bo-Katan, and I did not watch the Clone Wars very much. But in terms of the continuity of the show itself, they did establish that at least some of the Mandalorians that we saw in the first season survived. That some of them may have fled and gone further underground. The blacksmith, she does allude to that not everybody died. Most of them did. The vast majority of them did, but apparently at least a few of them might have gotten away. So it is, again, I go back to me, I just want to know who this Mandalorian is, if they are a real Mandalorian or not. I'm kind of already over the frog lady.
Right.
It's just a very contrived situation that I think is just meant to make a toy. I'm just gonna say it. I think it's just all this controversy really is just so kind of silly because hey, this is what they were really doing. They decided to be a fun gimmick. We wanted to make this Funko Pop. It was so adorable. This is Baby Yoda eating the eggs. I could imagine them having a little thing where you shoot the eggs into Baby Yoda's mouth. Like a little
right.
You hit it and it pops into his mouth.
Yeah, I think this whole thing kind of backfired on them a little bit, at least with certain fans anyway.
But the funny thing is, because we've talked about this both on the air a little bit and off the air, because the election coverage is sort of like taking everything over. I haven't been hearing a lot of buzz about the Mandalorian, but the buzz I did hear was people complaining about the eggs. So maybe it did work, because otherwise people might not be talking about the episode at all.
Yeah, I could see that. So, the way this episode basically ends is that it looks like they're going to get overrun by the spiders. I'm going to recap it here real quick just because we're about at the hour mark. So basically they almost get overrun by these spider creatures, obviously call back to aliens. But at the same point too, it kind of has sort of reference or feels besides the connection to Rebels and stuff. There's also a little bit of that feel of that sort of like 1950s, giant insect horror movie kind of stuff. There's a little feel of that too, kind of mixed up with this. But it looks like they're going to get overrun and they actually get saved by quote unquote the space cops or the X-Wing pilots that we saw at the beginning. And they actually help them out. There's kind of a funny scene too where the Mandalorian's like, how about I forego my bounty and you guys help me patch up the ship? And the guy goes, well, how about you just dig yourself out and we don't arrest you? And then they fly off, which is kind of funny. Because they determine that that he is kind of wanted. But at the same point, too, they also know that basically Mandalorian risked his life to actually try and save the sort of detention officer at that prison, right? And they know that he, was trying to, help that guy out, which is kind of cool because it's kind of nice to know that they do they weigh both options and they decide to, they kind of leave him stuck. They kind of leave him high and dry, but at least they don't necessarily like take him in,
No, it's very Westernish. It's very Western.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the U.S. Marshal or whatever, who's, they're very limited resources. They're out there doing what they do, so they choose their battles. You know what I mean? And they're like, okay, you're not as bad as what we're looking for, because they even say they're looking for Imperial remnants. That's really what they're out there doing. So they're like, you're not, you're a criminal, but you're
right.
You're not an Imperial remnant. We know who you are. So we're going to move on and go look for the people we're actually out here supposed to be trying to get. You know what I mean? That's kind of the idea,
Yeah.
And it does kind of harken back to I think a lot of the Western stuff, because you'll have that where, the Marshals out there looking for a specific person, a specific, somebody that has a warrant or whatever, and they'll come across all sorts of other things along that adventure, along that line. It's like, well, they got to kind of ignore that because they're there for one purpose only, so they can't deal with everything else other than, a little bit at a time, do what they can do. And that does harken back, I think, again to the whole Western idea. James is in the house and he's saying, I haven't caught up, so I'm not joining tonight. And if you're talking about the Mandalorian, we're almost at the end of our discussion. So, James, if you do want to stick around, if that's what you're talking about, we're going to be getting into pop culture very, very soon. But Matthew had another cool comment where he was talking about, so if you saw Rebels, in the last season, the Darksaber was given to Bo-Katan. Obviously, Moff Gideon has it now. So I think Bo-Katan is maybe in carbonite as a trophy in Moff Gideon's office somewhere. That sounds pretty cool. I like that idea. I think that'd be kind of neat. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
We
we'll see.
haven't seen Moff Gideon. Where is Moff Gideon?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they introduce, Moff Gideon and what all it is ends up happening with him. So I'm curious about that as well. So, like I said,
there is a trailer that appears to be in the trailer. There is a scene that appears to be like some stormtroopers scrambling at what looks like possibly like a base or something like that. So we know we haven't seen the end of the Imperial remnant. So
for sure. So the space cops decide to leave the Mandalorian be. They patch up the ship and they basically kind of get back on their journey essentially. The
ship is totally ghettoed out at that point. Also, it's like totally falling apart. All the doors are open, and it's just like it's like a floating piece of junk, basically.
Right. But like I said, I could see the complaints. That there's a filler episode. That being said, like I said, I didn't hate it either, and I enjoyed it for what it was. That's my particular take. And then Erica, I know that you said that you felt like it was definitely a filler episode. You said after we discussed it, are you still kind of going, I was okay, or do you feel like that you didn't like as much as you initially thought?
Yeah, it's funny talking to you. I do like it less. I mean, because I think that there was some obvious potential there that you see, and I think would have been cool. And it's like, oh, they didn't do that. Instead it's just about ultimately this episode is just going to be remembered about Baby Yoda eating the frogs. I mean, eating the frog babies, the frog eggs. You know what I mean? So that kind of sums it right up right there. I will say that I did like a little bit of what you were talking about as far as establishing the New Republic a little bit more. Obviously, in the Disney Wars, they didn't establish the New Republic at all. You get like half a scene where they just blow them up and it's over, and now it's just all about the rebellion. Oh, I mean the resistance. I mean, they're the same thing, folks. I mean, come on. But anyway, it's just like, at least you're getting some of that. So I'll give it that, because I am interested in that stuff. I think that would be cool to explore that entire situation a little bit more when the New Republic is establishing itself. A lot of the expanded universe stuff that people love so much totally delved into that, and so we didn't get any of that in Disney Wars. So that would have been cool. But ultimately, this is the story of the Mandalorian and the child, and we've got to find that frickin' Mandalorian and move the story along.
Right. So unless you have anything else to add, Eric, I think that's probably pretty good. We're at the 1 hour mark, and maybe we could look at segueing over into pop culture news. Do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Getting some pop culture news.
Very cool. So let's set this up just real quick. So
we do have one more comment before we move on, Dave. So
okay.
Matthew mentions that, and also the blue dude that was Mando's first bounty in the trailer, he is seen with Cara Dune in a troop transport. So maybe Mando broke him out from the Imperial base, and also Bo-Katan. I'm not sure what that scene is that you're referring to. With I vaguely remember the blue dude. He's the one that gets frozen in carbonite, right? It says in the trailer he is seen with Cara Dune in a troop transport, so maybe Mando broke him out from the Imperial base and also Bo-Katan. I don't know. I mean, was the blue dude an enemy of the Imperial remnant? It seemed to me that the New Republic guys heavily implied that these bounties are actually being put out by the New Republic. So that's what they were talking about, is like these bounties are actually, that's one of the reasons they let him go. It's like, hey, you've done some good stuff for us. You got some people that we were looking for, because obviously, the bounty hunters, I guess, they'll sort of take commissions from pretty much anybody. So they're kind of working for both sides at this point, it sounds like. And literally that's where the Mandalorian is that they were saying was like, yeah, you've helped us out. You've also kind of screwed us over. It kind of evens out in the grand scheme of things. So who knows? Who knows if the blue dude is with Moff Gideon or not?
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what they do with that. So I'm just going to set up the pop culture news segment here just real quick. So in the pop culture news segment, we're going to be talking about anything that's happening in the world of pop culture news. Hopefully this will be something that either caught Eric's attention or my attention, but something we hope that you think will be worthy of discussion. That's what we cover here on the pop culture news. Let's see. I'm not sure who wants to go first. We are at the 1 hour 5. Let's see. Do you want to go first, Eric, or do you want me to go first?
I have some pretty big news, so I'll go ahead. I'll go first if you don't mind. I think I have something that a lot of people have been anticipating and have been wondering about, and definitely have an interest in. So let me get the article here. And this is actually from trekmovie.com, of all things, which is kind of interesting that that's the source of this information. So trekmovie.com had an article recently, and it says exclusive. The Orville Season 3 is returning to production in December. And a lot of people have been waiting for this. It says, step by step, film and television production is slowly resuming, even as the pandemic continues. Star Trek Discovery added production on Season 4 a week ago in Toronto, which I did not realize that. And Picard is set to get going on Season 2 in January in Southern California. Boo. Anyway.
Boo, hiss, boo.
And we just got word that the Orville, that Seth MacFarlane's homage to Star Trek The Next Generation, is ramping up to start production on its 3rd season in December. So there you have it, everybody. Interestingly enough, that is a TrekMovie.com exclusive, because there definitely is a rivalry between the Orville and Star Trek at this point. In fact, there's a lot of fans, such as myself, that are very against New Trek and don't like what CBS All Access has been doing. But we are fans of the Orville, and it looks like the Orville is finally coming back. And had you heard about this, Dave?
I knew at some point they would be filming new episodes, but I didn't realize that. For some reason, I thought they'd already. Well, maybe I guess they're in pre-production, and I guess during lockdown. I don't know. I've been having a hard time figuring out like where the Orville is in terms of production. I mean, I know that we've covered it here on the show. We're kind of part of that Orville, fan community because of our connection with
Orville Nation,
PJ and Orville Nation. But I'm going to be honest. I hadn't really, besides what we've covered here, I've had a hard time sometimes wrapping my head around where the Orville is technically a production. I thought they had already been filming, and then they had actually been shut down because of the pandemic. So maybe I guess they were just in, because I thought that there'd been some.
They were about halfway done with Season 3 when they were shut down.
Okay.
By the pandemic.
Okay.
They were about halfway done, and they have not been doing anything since.
Okay. Well, that kind of fills in the gap, because that was the thing I was curious. I was kind of confused by. I was like, well, I thought they had been filming. So okay. So was I aware of this particular news? No, but like I said, I had thought that they had been filming anyway. So, but I'm glad to hear that they're getting back to it, and hopefully they'll get production running up again. I feel like I don't know. We'll see where we are in December. I'm not sure how well that's going to go for them, but let's hope it goes well, and they're able to film whatever they were, the remainder they need, so that we can get to Season 3 sooner than later.
Yeah, and that's the big question ultimately, is how long is it going to take for Season 3 to actually come out? Is it even going to come out next year? We don't know. We were talking off the air. I had just found some breaking news that several productions have already been shut down due to positive COVID tests. It's unfortunate, and it's just part of how things are right now. I'm dealing with this myself right now, trying to film in California. I live in Arizona. I had to get a test done here. I'm going to have to do another test when I get into town in California, and it's no joke. I'm telling you, it is a pain in the butt. And like I said, I was just looking at an article on Deadline. There's already 3 productions that have already been shut down again because of positive COVID tests. So it's going to be rocky. It's going to be tough for the Orville to get back in production, because unlike so many other shows where you can kind of, first of all, a lot of other shows aren't filmed in California. I'm just going to say it. A lot of other shows like The Mandalorian, that's not filmed in California, right? That's filmed in England, right? So that there's different regulations and things like that depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. But the other side of it is, the Orville is very studio centric. So, they don't film on location a lot. They do film on location some, like when they're on an alien planet, that might actually be some real place. But then again, it also might be created in a studio, and that makes it tougher. You know what I mean? So because that's just the way it is. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes and when they actually finish season 3 and when we actually get to see it. But I am happy that at least they're trying. They're going to get back on track, hopefully. And eventually this season is going to get done. And the big question, of course, now also is with all these delays, will this be the last season of the Orville? And because I don't think it was intended that way. There was a big rumor mill saying, oh, they never intended to do more than season 3. The producer came out and said, no, we've always intended to take this as far as we could. That's not true. But because of all the delays and because of the situation as it is right now and how fluid it is that going to affect it? Is that going to destroy the momentum of the show? That's an open-ended question.
Yeah, it's curious because I'm wondering how things are going to go. For example, for Marvel, whenever Marvel's productions actually start ramping up and we can actually start seeing things again, I'm beginning to wonder if maybe the pandemic might have unfortunately negatively affected that as well. I mean, I guess we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see.
Well, I always say the barometer for Marvel right now is WandaVision. So we're going to see whether that thing is any good or if it's just a complete train wreck. I am hearing things that sound pretty optimistic. I actually saw a thing where they were talking about how Dick Van Dyke was actually involved in helping them sort of recreate that old style sitcom. They actually had a lunch with them and asked them a bunch of questions and stuff like that to sort of get that classic, that classic black and white, late 50s, early 60s type vibe for a sitcom and stuff like that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that because that's definitely a test for Marvel in my mind. In so many ways, that's a huge test for Marvel.
Yeah, it's going to be curious to see how all that unfolds. So let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the next news story if that's okay. I teased this at actually in the graphic actually for the show. I thought it'd be worthy of discussion. So this has been covered by a lot of different outlets in different ways. This is coming from a comics beat. Heidi McDonald wrote this, and this actually broke just basically today. This has been, like I said, it's been discussed pretty heavily, and I thought it would be interesting to just talk about it briefly. So I think a previous episode we talked that there's been obviously a lot of layoffs over at Warner Brothers when basically AT&T had taken control. A lot of people were wondering if they were done or if there was more to come. And the layoffs at DC Comics in regards to how this has been going on have been beyond extensive. And I feel like this headline is pretty poignant. It says, more layoffs at DC mark the end of an era. So the story here goes, as we reported yesterday, a new wave of layoffs swept over Warner Media yesterday, and that included DC Comics. Although DC staff was cut by as much as 25% back in August, still more employees were found to be let go. Among them, as we guessed yesterday, was Michelle Wells, VP and executive editor, DC Children's Young Adult, and had a brief 3-month period as DC's co-editor-in-chief. Alex Carr, a group editor, was also let go. Like Wells, Carr had a deep history in publishing, including launching Amazon's Jet Comics line and working on DC's kids' books. And this was the part that hit me the most. More troubling to industry watchers was the decimation of the direct sales department. I'm looking over at Old Masthead here, and it seems that everyone is gone, including sales manager Stuart Schreck, marketing services director Adam Phillips, and events director Fletcher Chu Fong. Vince Laterio, the executive director of direct sales, was let go in the last round. I knew Fletch from doing San Diego Comic-Con for several years. He was sort of like our coordinator that would see what we kind of wanted to do at the convention. He was always checking on us to make sure we had what we needed, and was just a really nice guy, and I think everyone loved Fletch. So this is really kind of sucky to hear that he has lost his job. I do feel like that this says something about how DC Comics feels about comic book conventions moving forward, though, because if you're paying attention to what's been going on, they're dismantling, for lack of a better term, they are dismantling their convention team. They're dismantling whole divisions. We talked about how DC Direct was gone, DC Universe is essentially gone. It sounds like they've basically taken their direct sales department apart. They've decimated their marketing department. I mean, I'm beginning to see the writing on the wall, like you said, Eric, that maybe as far as Warner Brothers and AT&T is concerned, maybe they don't want to be in the comic book business too much longer, because it's starting to feel like that they have no intention of looking at this long term. There had been a lot of speculation. For example, there had been a lot of speculation that they were going to focus on their young adult stuff, and that they were going to be looking at things as more kind of like the way Scholastic approaches stuff, and that they were going to move in that direction. And that's what had to do with Michelle Wells' promotion as kind of co-editor-in-chief or co-publisher or whatever. That signaled that was the direction they were going to take it in. And then lo and behold, she's out the door now too. And I know that she was instrumental in a lot of their young adult line initiatives that they have made recently. So maybe that hasn't gone well, or maybe AT&T's like, forget that. We don't want to do that. It's really weird what's been going on. So I'm of the opinion right now, because I've been hearing that there was some other people who were also let go in the midst of all this. And there was some more key staffers still to go. I'm beginning to wonder, like, even if Jim Lee is safe at this point. So, and when I started thinking back on it, pretty much everyone I worked with at DC Comics is now gone. There is no one left. I used to have a few contacts, and when I'd have a problem, an issue, there was someone I could send an email to, I could contact or whatever. I think pretty much everyone I knew at DC Comics is gone now. Every single person. And this headline here for this story, I think is pretty telling, where it says that more layoffs at DC mark the end of an era. And I started thinking about that and kind of letting that, for me personally, sink in, as someone who at one point was a freelancer who worked for DC Comics, as someone who's been a DC Comics fan for a very, very long time. DC Comics is always my first love. So the fact that I got to work at DC Comics as an artist was a huge, big deal for me. But when I think back on it, when I think about my love of DC Comics and these characters, it's, around about the time that Jeanette Kahn took over. It's when Paul Levitz was sort of like editor-in-chief. I rode through all that stuff and all the rocky things that happened over the years that eventually led us to, Dan DiDio, and then eventually, of course, him working with Jim Lee, and I got lucky enough to get to work there for a little while. It really, for me, feels like this is maybe the closing of the book as far as DC Comics is concerned for me. I've not really been reading a lot of the newer comics lately, partly because there's really not anyone left working there that I knew. For a time, I felt like I was kind of still supporting some of my friends or my other fellow industry professionals who I respected and stuff. And it's not that I disrespect anyone working on the titles right now. I just have no connection to them. I'm so far removed from whatever's going on right now. I couldn't even tell you what is even happening. I know they're doing some metal event or something. I don't know. It just seemed all a bit strange to me. So I haven't read an actual DC comic in quite some time. And I think for me, maybe that's what this signals. I still love my comics that I have. I'll still collect things from time to time, but I think my time as a diehard devoted DC fanboy, I think maybe those days are done. So, and maybe this is even for me, maybe this is the end of an era. So I know you'd heard some about the layoffs that have been going on, Eric. Had you heard that there'd been even more at DC Comics?
No, not until you brought it up. I didn't realize that. I have heard a lot about AT&T and Time Warner, which is actually, I always say it wrong now. It's Warner Media. It's called Warner Media. It's not Time Warner anymore. And what they've been doing, and we've talked a lot about that also in our Streaming Wars coverage when we relate that to HBO Max, because it's all connected. Obviously, it's all the same company. And really, the problem with AT&T is they have massive debt. They have massive, massive debt, and they are selling stuff off like crazy to try to attack that debt a little bit, which is sound. I mean, that makes sense from a business standpoint. They got all this debt. They can't keep going that way, and so they've got to do something. And I think in a lot of ways, what the writing on the wall is, rather than try to make these divisions healthy again, I think they're looking to sell them off. So we'll see. I wish there was better communication. You talk about, this what just happened to their marketing department. Man, their marketing department just sucks. I mean, for AT&T in general right now, because they are not communicating well at all to the fan base. Because there's a huge fan base out there that's really wondering what the heck is going on. So it's like you should be communicating like a lot right now to tell people what they can expect. And, and they're just doing a terrible job of it. Like the whole thing with DC Universe that they're shutting down was not handled well at all. I remember when you were reporting that, hey, the year subscription deal is gone. Okay, so obviously DC Universe is going away, but they don't communicate that. And and here's another thing. We've talked about that again related to the HBO Max coverage and stuff like that. So much of what they have on DC Universe can and should be put on HBO Max, including the comics, because that would make them unique to all the other streaming platforms out there. It's like a no-brainer, but they're not doing it, and they're not communicating well as far as what the path forward is. Everybody was freaked out, obviously, when it comes to the comics and the fact that they dumped Diamond, and it's created a lot of uncertainty. Well, it's like, communicate what your intention is here. Do you want to just get out of the direct market completely and get back into stores? Because you know what? I might be able to support that. I hate to say it because I love my comic book stores, but I've seen the problems with the direct market, for years. I still remember the first San Diego Comic-Con I went to in 1998, and I got a big education on that stuff. And back then they still had FM and they still had Cold Cut. Cold Cut and FM still existed as distributors back then. They were fighting for the last 2 to 3% of the market, which they were so proud of. I remember actually going to a panel with Cold Cut, and they were talking about that. They were number 2. They were number 2 back then as far as distribution. That model was never going to work. I think that model was always doomed. I think it was just a bad thing. I know we don't always agree on this, Dave, but I'm one of those big guys that says, hey, I got my comics at Circle K at convenience stores, and that's where I think they need to be if you want to actually have some hope of the future. Because, the number of comic book stores keeps dwindling all the time, unfortunately. And it becomes a very specialty kind of thing. And comics are not, in my mind, a specialty thing. They are a medium like any other medium for telling stories. And, you got to get exposure to it so that people are out there and they can see, oh yeah, look, there's a new, Batman comic. Let me check it out. That kind of stuff. Got to get them over like Archie did for years. Remember, Archie was like the last comic book that you could actually buy in a grocery store. They used to be right next to the Inquirer and all that stuff. For a long time, Archie Comics was like the last bastion. They were the only ones still doing that. And then even they went away eventually. But I remember that. I remember when they were the last ones that they were right up there next to the Inquirer when you went to, when you checked out at the grocery store. Go to Archie Comics. They really hung in there for a long time. And now I think Archie Comics actually is part of DC now, isn't it? Didn't they acquire Archie Comics? So they're not independent anymore, I don't think.
No, Archie's still its own thing.
Are you sure about that? I could have sworn, because that's why they're on the CW and everything like that, is that they were acquired by Warner Media.
I don't think they were. I mean, maybe something happened that I missed, but as far as I know, Archie's still it's kind of its own thing.
Get a little. We can fact check that pretty easily. So Archie Comics. Just putting into
Now,
Google real
Disney
quick.
did acquire Mad Magazine, and they did at one point. They were consolidating different kind of things, but I don't think at any point that Archie is a part of Warner as far as as far as I can remember. That would have been big news. I always felt like part of the reason Archie's been able to survive is because they're not a part of DC or Marvel. They are kind of their own independent thing.
And like I said, they kind of held on to the sort of the retail market, the broader market, longer than anybody else did. Like I said, you could still find Archie comics in supermarkets up until, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, something like that, maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
But they were like the last ones that still had that. Let's see. As far as I can tell, you're correct. They are still independent. I was just trying to look at the end of this article I'm looking at here. Obviously, they do have Riverdale. Over at Warner Brothers does actually produce that. So I think that's probably where I was coming from as far as what I was thinking. It said here. They do also have a deal, I guess, with Marvel as well for Marvel Digest, which is kind of interesting. So, so I guess they are still fighting the good fight. I guess they're the last big classic comic book company that's still out there that's on its own. It's not part of some other big company or anything like that. So that's neat. That's kind of interesting. But as far as what DC is doing, and ultimately it comes down to what AT&T is doing. I think they're doing a very poor job of communicating what the direction is that they're going in. And that's ultimately going to hurt them, I think, because it's just creating a lot of confusion among the fans about what are you doing? What's the plan here?
Well, and it's creating a lot of confusion amongst even sort of their former, freelancer people too, because I am sort of like in a weird sort of like, well, what's going on? Because the last few times I've tried to contact anyone at editorial, and this is before the layoffs, like no one was responding back to my questions about things. And it's, it was just kind of weird. Like I couldn't get a response out of anyone. But now with everything being dismantled, like I said, there's really no one left on my contact sheet. I could even, you know what I mean? Email at this point. There's no one even left. So, as a former freelancer who did work for them, I don't even know who I would contact if I had a problem with something. It's just weird. So we do have a comment over here in the Rogues Gallery real quick. We're at 127. I wasn't going to cover this story too heavily, just because we were trying to keep it at about an hour or 30 minutes tonight. But we do still need to get at least one Streaming Wars story in. But just real quickly there, I guess is that Joe's 1257? I'm not exactly sure how to say your screen name there, but what's up with Wonder Woman 84? All I was going to do is bring up the fact that they have basically unsolicited and canceled the orders for the Wonder Woman 84 sort of cover event that DC had planned. They were going to be doing these exclusive covers that tied into the movie. And a lot of people are feeling like that is signaling the fact that possibly Wonder Woman 84 release date might be getting ready to get pushed yet again, or that something different is going to be happening with it. Because usually what they do is they try to tie all the different merchandising opportunities in with the marketing opportunities in order to make, like, as much as they can, kind of a consolidated push before they release a film or a show or whatever. And the fact that all of a sudden all of the previously solicited covers have now been pulled, a lot of people are taking that as a signal that it means Wonder Woman 84, that its release date might be getting ready to get pushed again.
Yeah, as you were talking, I found this Bleeding Cool article that talks about that. That says Wonder Woman 1984 delayed again. DC cancels tie-in covers for December. And there's some pretty neat covers here. They have some of the images of the covers here that look pretty cool.
Right, and that's what I was saying. It was going to be a big, huge push that was tying into the film, and now the fact that they're pulling all these covers, like I said, a lot of people are kind of reading into that and thinking that it means that Wonder Woman 84 is about to get pushed again, unfortunately. So we'll have to kind of wait and see if that ends up actually being the thing or not. But as far as I can tell, usually when stuff like this happens, it means because something's happened with a release date and it's about to get moved. So that was in the teaser graphic. That's what I was talking about. Wonder Woman 84 is that there's a lot of reporting going on that the release date might be pushed yet again. Unfortunately, I've been looking forward to this film for quite some time, and because of everything that's going on with the pandemic, it's just continuing to wreak havoc with release schedules. So,
and really, also, it's kind of interesting because we were talking a lot about the state of the comic book industry and how bad it is. It's been bad for a long time, but the theater industry is facing the same kind of challenges right now.
Yeah,
and there's this question of whether, with these delays, ultimately, what they're going to do is, are they going to essentially destroy the theater industry because of these delays, these constant delays? Because, they keep thinking, oh, well, it'll be so much better if we wait. We'll make a lot more money if we wait. Make money where? With who? Who's going to be left after all this? Because that's the problem. It's very, very short-sighted, in my opinion. I think what we're trying to do at AMC with Universal, where they were trying to basically reduce the window, the exclusivity window, so that they could get some of these movies into theaters, and at the same time put them on a streaming service, sell them to Netflix, whatever it was they're going to do, depending on what platforms they have access to. Because that's what the big debate has been for a long time, ever since Netflix became a big thing. It's about that exclusivity as far as that window when the theaters have exclusivity over the movie. And, AMC and Universal made this really great deal that basically cut it down to, I think, 17 days, basically just over 2 weeks of exclusivity. And then also AMC gets some portion of the download deals too. So once it does become available for video on demand, that's where you go to iTunes or you go to PlayStation and you download the movie. They're getting a cut of that as well. That's what they should be doing. They should be helping each other out, and they should be getting some of these movies out there. That I believe that 100%. What they're doing now is basically cutting their own throats because they're delaying, hoping that it's going to be better later. There's not going to be anybody left. That's the position that they're going to be putting the theater industry in. It's really, really nuts. And they are playing a very, very dangerous game, I think, right now with what they're doing. I really think that the model that Universal was doing with AMC is the way to go forward. And I've heard that Cinemark is also looking into that, where Cinemark is doing it on a case-by-case basis, where they're making deals basically, instead of by studio, they're making deals by movie. And they're saying, okay, well, we'll make a deal with you. We'll cut our exclusivity window. That's when you hear that, special engagement, that kind of stuff, those terms. We'll reduce that amount of time so we can at least get some new movies in our theater. Because there are theaters that are open and they are just dying right now because they have no new content to put out. There's so little new content. There was a Kevin Costner movie that just came out this weekend. And there was a couple other movies that are relatively new that are out there. But they are just not the draw that these big blockbusters are. So I think they're playing a very dangerous game with all these delays. I would say just let Wonder Woman come out on Christmas and see what happens. And just let's go forward. You know what I mean? Because, and again, they should be looking at cutting a deal that, in terms of, like I said, reduce that exclusivity window. So then they can put Wonder Woman on HBO Max, everybody wins that way. Put it out in the theaters for a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, make that window smaller, and then throw it up on HBO Max. There you go. Do something with it.
Right. Yeah. So like I said, that was the only thing I was going to cover in relation to that. So Eric, we're at 1 hour, 34 minutes. Do we want to do a streaming wars?
I had one more pop culture news that I did want to make sure that I got to, and it's kind of funny because we're doing a lot of DC stuff right now, a lot of Warner Media. But then again, I think Dave and I have said we pretty much are like DC guys. I mean, we like Marvel as well. I mean, I've said it. I'm I'm really interested to see how WandaVision turns out, because I think it's going to be a very good indication of the future of Marvel. So we'll see how that goes. But I found this IGN article, and the title reads, Zack Snyder has a plan for Justice League 2. Says the filmmaker already knows what happens with the story after the miniseries. So for those that don't remember or don't realize, there's going to be coming out a miniseries on HBO Max. It's not going to be just one continuous movie. It's actually going to be a miniseries. And there was this quote, because it said that Snyder recently appeared as a special guest on a League of Mayhem live stream from the one. Over the course of the conversation, Snyder revealed that he already knows how the story would be too. It says, quote, what do I say? What happens when Darkseid Earth? He quizzed. It's a thing. The truth is that, did I write and did I have and conceive a complete, I know what happens when Darkseid? Yes, I do know what happens. To say and to speculate about what that is, that would be exciting. I think that's a fine thing. So basically what he's saying is that he pretty much knows, at least in his head, where he's going with the story of Justice League and ultimately the appearance of Darkseid. The article mentions that Darkseid is going to have some sort of a role to play in the Snyder. That's definitely exciting news to me. I've been waiting for Darkseid to be on screen. Remember, even though you saw Thanos on screen first, Darkseid came first. And a lot of people acknowledge that Thanos is, in fact, a copy of Darkseid. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, because I've speculated many times on a Snyderverse, and it seems like Zack Snyder absolutely is ready to go on that.
Well, here's where I am with that. With everything that's going on at DC and Warner Media at the moment, I know that there is a big push to create content for HBO Max. So in that context, I'm thinking there's a good chance that if Justice League does well, that maybe there could be a quote unquote Snyderverse that moves forward. And then we get to see these other things that, Zack Snyder had been thinking about in relation to his version of Justice League. Maybe, I've heard rumors and rumblings about Ben Affleck actually making his Batman movie he originally intended to make. I mean, there's all these interesting things kind of swirling around. Basically, the original intention and plans that were intended for the DC universe, until apparently other forces moved in and dismantled whatever they had been intending to try to accomplish. So I do think that if the Justice League film does well, if it makes HBO Max some good money, you know what I mean, that there's a good chance that this might move forward. That being said, we've also covered the literal decimation that's happening to Warner Media and DC Comics right now, because AT&T is looking to just boot anything that isn't basically making them money. Anything that's just costing them money and not immediately like adding to the bottom line, it's out of here. So there's the potential, because I feel like part of what they're using to pay for, and I don't know this, this is just me speculating, I would be willing to bet that a percentage of what's paying for the reshoots and the finishing of the Zack Snyder cut at one point or another might have been allocated, to the HBO Max, marketing budget. Maybe they're taking some of these funds and using that to finish this, and then using that as, stories, about the production, and releasing all these trailers and getting people a little hyped and excited, because people want this. So I think they're using the Zack Snyder Justice League movie, and we've seen it already. It is being used as a marketing tool to sell HBO Max. But I have a very good feeling that if it doesn't do a good job of selling HBO Max by the time it comes out, that this may be over with really quick. We'll get the Zack Snyder Justice League movie, but if it doesn't add to the bottom line in a significant way, right from the jump, I think I don't think we're going to see anything else out of it. To be honest with you, the news coming out of Warner Media in my mind is so bad. Um, I would not be surprised if DC doesn't have much of a presence in the movie theaters and whatever moving forward for a little while. That maybe this is the last hurrah, if the Matt Reeves Batman movie doesn't hit big. This might be it, because I don't. It's just weird, all this news. I mean, the news coming out of Warner Media is really bad. I know Eric knows how bad it is, and I understand how bad it is, but it's pretty extreme what's going on over there right now. So I don't know how much more there might be to the Snyderverse, or even whatever the original plans were for DC Comics and film. Like I know on TV, there's still, we've got the Lois and Clark show, the new Superman show that'll be coming out soon. But a lot of these other, a lot of the other CW shows, they're in a weird state since Arrow ended, and you've got the drama about what happened on the Batwoman show. I heard the ratings for that haven't been very good. I think Supergirl's ending, if I remember correctly. So I don't know where the future for DC Comics is in film anyway, if the Zack Snyder Justice League movie doesn't make a big, huge splash and prove that the Snyderverse deserves to exist. I know it sounds kind of extreme, but I think that's kind of where we're at if you're paying attention to what AT&T is doing to Warner Media right now. And again, that's just my opinion. It's just my opinion. I mean, you tell me, Eric. I mean, do you think I'm just completely out of left field with this, or can you see what I'm saying?
No, I think it's all dependent on how the Snyder Cut plays out on HBO Max. I mean, it's a make or break moment. But if it does well in terms of actually getting people to subscribe to HBO Max, of course they're going to continue with it. Of course they are. I mean, that's the bottom line. So because they're putting pretty much all their eggs in that basket right now. There's nothing on HBO Max right now that's making any significant buzz, at least positive. You know what I mean? So I rarely hear anything about HBO Max. So I think they pretty much have all their hopes right now on the Snyder Cut, and it has got them a lot of attention. So if it comes out and people like it, and you know what, the thing is, people don't even really have to like it. What it has to do is it just has to get a lot of eyes on HBO Max and a lot of freaking subscribers. And one of the really interesting things about this is it also has to get a significant number of AT&T users to actually use their access to HBO Max. We talked about earlier how badly they communicate this stuff. I think a lot of those people have no idea that they have free access to HBO Max, because if they did, they would use it. It's just poor communication and poor marketing. AT&T should be really pushing that. Hey, you get AT&T, you get HBO Max for free. Look at all the cool stuff on there, But they're not doing a good job with that. So it seems like all their hopes are pinned right now on the Snyder Cut really hitting big, getting people's eyes on the platform, checking this thing out. And if it happens, I think that of course there's going to be a Snyderverse. But if it doesn't, that's it. That'll be it. It'll be like a little experiment and be like, we're not doing that ever again.
It would be really weird if, for example, like the Snyderverse works, it gets a lot of people to try HBO Max, and all of a sudden there's this renewed interest in moving forward with doing stuff with DC films, but on HBO Max. And then the Matt Reeves Batman movie comes out, and it doesn't quite click with people like they expect, and maybe it underperforms. And then shortly thereafter, Ben Affleck gets the green light to move forward with his Batman movie, and ends up becoming like a big, huge hit on HBO Max. And there's like this thriving DC film universe thing happening on HBO Max. But as far as DC films and movie theaters, it doesn't kind of exist beyond occasionally like those limited screening events, because technically it's all happening on HBO Max. It's not actually happening. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And actually, I could see that even just happening just because of because of the collapse of the theater industry. I could see that happening, that scenario happening there as well. So because that there is no assured path forward right now when it comes to when they're actually going to be releasing these movies theatrically. It's just not there.
Yeah, it's a strange series of events, and it's causing all kinds of unusual things to be occurring. That's for sure. Okay, cool. Are we good to segue over into streaming wars?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So we'll just set this up just real quick. So here in the Streaming Wars segment, we talk about anything that's interesting that's happening in the world of the streaming wars. Now, you'd be asking yourself, what do you mean by streaming wars? Are we talking about like fish and stream, like that kind of streaming wars? Because we know there's a bass god, there's some kind of fishing connection. No, that's not it at all. That's not the deal. We're actually talking about streaming video shows, like or platforms, things that all of us enjoy that we've kind of been talking about already tonight. Whether we're talking about HBO Max, we're talking about Netflix, whether we're talking about Apple Plus, if anyone's even talking about Apple Plus anymore. We're basically talking about any one of these amazing, really great, highly entertaining streaming services that hopefully you or I enjoy. That's what we're talking about. We talk about the streaming wars. So tell me, Eric, what do you have up for tonight's segment of the streaming wars?
All right. So I have this article that I thought actually was kind of fun. One thing I know we like to do is we do like to actually talk about some of the different free platforms that are available out there. And this is one, to be honest with you, it's not that I personally use a lot, but I have used it. But there's a bigger point to this article that I want to talk about that I really found interesting because I can relate to this. And I wonder if other people can relate to this as well. So this is from uprocks.com. The title of the article is Pluto TV brings the enjoyment of channel surfing to the streaming age. And basically what this article is all about, and I really enjoyed this article, was that they were talking about that Pluto TV, unlike a lot of the other streaming platforms, actually has like its own channels. So it actually has its own channels that behave the way that linear traditional TV operates. So rather than you picking which episode of, let's say, Unsolved Mysteries that you want to watch, because Unsolved Mysteries is on Pluto TV, you can, because they do have a section where you can take like, movies and television shows and, the traditional streaming experience, and you pick what you want to watch. But you can instead go to the Unsolved Mysteries channel and you can just watch whatever it is that's playing at that moment. And the funny thing is, I haven't been doing that with Pluto TV very much, but I have been doing that on Peacock, because Peacock also has a similar setup where they allow you to do the sort of traditional streaming experience where you pick and choose what it is that you want to watch. But they also have these channels. Some of them are news channels, sports channels, and they behave like linear TV. And what I really had fun with this article about was it represented me, and I didn't think anybody else thought like me, and I realized, well, at least one other person does, because this guy writing the article thinks like me. Because one of the issues that I have, and I've had for a long time with Netflix, and I have the same issue with Disney Plus, and I have the same issue with, what else do I have? Hulu, right? Those are the services that I have that are sort of that traditional setup where, hey, I get to choose whatever I want. I feel like there's like overchoice. And what I end up doing is I've actually spent evenings where I'm just going through Netflix, looking at all the different stuff on there, and I never choose anything to watch. I've had that experience multiple times because there's just so much. And I'm like thinking like I'm adding more and more stuff to my queue, as far as my personal queue. I'll get back to that later. But what if there's something else that I want to see more? And there's just something fun about that traditional broadcast experience. Most of my TV viewing is not in streaming right now. Most of my TV viewing is actually on Heroes and Icons and the Comet Network. Those are basically over-the-air broadcast channels that you can get with an antenna depending on where you live. It's not available necessarily everywhere, but lots of places those channels are available. And actually, Comet also does their own streaming. They actually have their own streaming component with an app and all that stuff. But I kind of enjoy sometimes just being able to kind of sit back and just watch what's on, just like that traditional TV experience, and just watch what's on. And I think it's interesting because Pluto TV is doing a really good job And actually, their numbers are better than CBS All Access, and Pluto TV is part of CBS. And I think, in large part, that's what helps that platform. Is it interestingly enough, that sort of old school way of presenting content is what actually helps them sort of differentiate themselves from so many of the other streaming services. So I just found that interesting, and I know that you, Dave, you were using Pluto TV. I think you were talking about how you used it a lot for news for a while, but I just think that's kind of interesting, that idea of sort of going back in time and having more of that sort of broadcast experience as opposed to just having all these different choices you got to choose from.
Yeah, it's interesting because what my wife and I, we got it started off as a trial subscription to Sling, and now it's turned into like where we basically have Sling, at least for right now, Sling TV. And on Sling TV is where I've been primarily channel surfing. And we do occasionally find ourselves watching something under normal circumstances I don't know if we necessarily would watch. The funny thing is, though, the thing that we've been watching the most of lately, which my wife turned it on actually for our dogs when we went out to go do something. We have 2 girl dogs, and so my wife turned on actually the Golden Girls for them one day when we went out to run some errands, because we were concerned about, I think it was around Halloween, because we had to leave them here at the house for a little while, and we were concerned about trick-or-treaters or people or whatever maybe disturbing them. And so we turned on the Golden Girls, and that got us on the kick because we ended up watching part of one of the episodes and enjoying it and going, I remember watching Golden Girls back in the day. So we've actually been rewatching Golden Girls, which is kind of unusual. And it's interesting because when we had been specifically talking about movies, I think primarily it was stuff that was on demand or stuff that was available on Pluto TV, because we covered that during the show, during our quarantine specials, as we were calling them. And we were recommending that people try out some of these ad-supported platforms and services, things such as Pluto TV, things such as, Tubi. We recently reviewed Silent Rage, actually on Crackle, and have been talking about the value that these kind of services actually offer. For example, I've been talking about Swamp Thing. You could actually watch Swamp Thing even if you weren't catching it on the CW when it was broadcast. You could actually go over and actually watch Swamp Thing over on the CW app if you really want it. So there's lots of cool ways for people to actually watch and sample content. But it's funny because whenever I'm on something like Sling or Pluto or whatever, and it has sort of the channel surfing thing, what I find myself doing is channel surfing into almost oblivion. It's almost like sometimes it's like there's too many, kind of like you're saying, there's maybe too many things, and I'm not sure what to pick. And then the things I always wind up settling on are really strange things. Like I found myself turning on American Gladiators when I was on Pluto TV because they have an American Gladiators channel. That's all it is, During some of the stuff going on with the election, I've been going to Pluto TV. Right now, I've been going to Sling too. And, that's where I'll, turn on, one of the news stations to try and, figure out what's going on. Because it's something that was several days. It was like Groundhog Day. Bill Murray was like, it's Groundhog Day again. It felt like it's election day again, so I found myself kind of looking for information and news on there too. But it's weird because at times it does feel like when it comes to all this stuff that it is a bit of an embarrassment of riches because there's so much. But then the funny thing is sometimes the stuff I really want to watch, like Snoopy in Space, it's on some service I have no intention of ever subscribing to. So I begin to wonder, will I ever get to see any episodes of Snoopy in Space? Because I hear it's been nominated for some awards. So it's just kind of those weird things. It's just like, Cobra Kai is a perfect example of this, Eric. When Cobra Kai was kind of behind the paywall at YouTube, I would tell people, like, man, Cobra Kai is really great. But I didn't know that many people that were watching it, because no one was going to subscribe to YouTube Red or YouTube, whatever the hell they wanted to call it, just to watch Cobra Kai. It's like, yeah, I'd watch it, but it's on YouTube. Forget it, And it's like, okay, it's really good. Nah, forget it. I'm good. And then lo and behold, it gets on Netflix, and here it is. It seems like an overnight sensation. It's always been good. It's just it was behind a paywall. And then you got the flip of that, which is Discovery, which is now season one's no longer kind of behind a paywall because they've been releasing it. And it's missing with it, it's basically it's meeting with the same divisive reaction that it had when it was behind the paywall. Some people like it.
I haven't
some
heard
people
any
hate
reaction. Is anybody watching it?
There are
I mean,
some
I
people
haven't
watching
seen the
it,
numbers,
I'm
but I
talking
haven't
about
heard.
like
I haven't heard anything about Discovery on CBS. Obviously, some people. It's hard to make that distinction. There's CBS All Access, right? That's the streaming platform. Then there's CBS, the broadcast network. And I haven't heard any buzz about Discovery when they put it out on CBS as far as for broadcast. Haven't heard anything.
Well, what I'm talking about is actual human beings that I've talked to that I know. Because there are some people they're watching, they're not discovering Discovery, but they're watching Discovery right now because they're able to finally watch it because they were not going to subscribe to CBS All Access. And there are other people who were curious about it, who have tried it, who were just like, no. So that's what I'm talking about. It's like amongst people, amongst actual human beings I know, there are people that are now getting the chance to watch Discovery because it's not kind of behind a paywall. So now there's some people I know actually trying the show right now because they can actually watch it. And it's the same thing with Swamp Thing. I know some people watching Swamp Thing because now they don't have to have a DC Universe subscription to watch it. So there are some people that are now, watching the show. And what's interesting is, unlike Cobra Kai, which I knew Cobra Kai was great, and I knew people would love it if they could see it. Lo and behold, people could see it and they like it, right? And then Discovery, was sort of like hit or miss with people. Some people like it, some people hate it. And now that it's not behind the paywall, I mean, I know actual living, breathing human beings, and it is having the actual same reaction it had when it was behind the paywall. Some people are like, no, it's okay. They're continuing to watch, and other people are going, I didn't like it. I don't care. So it's still being with the same mixed reaction it had when it was behind the paywall. So, but there's a lot of things that I think if they were on ad-supported platforms like Pluto TV, that could find a significantly larger audience and maybe be a bit of a hit. Along these lines, Eric, it's not a streaming wars story, and I wasn't going to cover it for tonight, but I had in my pop culture notes, you think you might have seen it, I had this story about how Green Lantern, the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern film, which is, was a box office bomb when it came out, is actually finding an audience right now because it's available to watch on Netflix and other services in South America and other parts of the world. And it at one point was actually trending really high in that top 10 list. And everyone was sort of like, well, what's up with that? And it's like people are now discovering the Green Lantern movie and going, no, it's not that bad. I kind of like it. So it's weird.
There's something to be said because there's a difference between, obviously what you're going to go out to the movie theater and pay for that experience. There's that. That's a completely different thing than if you have a cable subscription and you just watch whatever happens to be on your favorite cable channel. That's a different experience. And then there's other people that are cord cutters like me. We don't want cable. We don't want anything to do with cable. So we become a cord cutter. Your option is, get yourself a decent antenna, right? Go out and get yourself a decent antenna so you can watch free TV over the air. And then, if you have internet, which I do, then you start looking at these free, streaming services in addition to the ones that I do pay for, like Netflix and Disney. But you look for these free ones. And what's interesting about Pluto TV is, it gives you that channel surfing experience with a lot of actually like sort of old school content, a lot of like retro content. It's not a lot of new content. It's a lot of old stuff, but it gives you that experience that you otherwise wouldn't have because you don't have cable. And I know there's people out there that are cord cutters. They don't even have an antenna for some reason. That there's some sort of block for them that, I can't get an antenna. I'm just not into that. I don't know why. I think that's you're really losing out on a lot by not having an antenna. But it's kind of nice to just have that option to be able to do that, and it kind of gives you that option also that things are kind of chosen for you. That's part of it too. You know what I mean? That to me is really helpful for my personal streaming experience, because when I have to choose, a lot of times I'm just like, nah, I'm gonna go see what's on Heroes and Icons, or I'm gonna go see what's on Comet right now.
Interesting. Cool. Did you have anything else that you want to cover for Streaming Wars tonight, or?
No, just the one.
Okay. All right. Okay. Looks like we're at about the 2-hour mark. If that's good with you, I think we'll go ahead and go to the outro.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
All right. Cool. All right. I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of Retro Rogues Live. Again, my name is Dave Beatty. I have been one of your hosts. You can see a lot of the fun things that I have going on, as well as possibly consider purchasing a t-shirt and supporting what we're doing here at the Retro Rogues Live by going to kirbytees.com. That's KIRBYTS.com. So you can find all the fun Retro Rogues Live merchandise, as well as some other fun things as well. I want to thank Eric Alexander, my co-host, for once again being on the show and providing his unique voice and perspective to all these interesting things we had to talk about. That's a lot of heavy things to talk about tonight, as well as some just silly fun things that we think some people are blowing out of proportion. So thanks again, Eric. And please tell the folks who'll be watching and listening at home where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
Well, I am most active on Twitter, and that's at BassGod14, at BASSGOD14. You can see that in the corner of my little avatar here. And that's also the official Twitch. That's the official YouTube right now. So you can contact me on any of those platforms. But like I said, Twitter, the DMs are always open. So if you have any comments, if you have any concerns, if you have suggestions, that's a great way to get a hold of me. I do obviously look at the comments on those other platforms as well. So if you leave a comment or something like that, I'm more than happy to respond to you there. And so unfortunately, we don't have a recent comment from the Rogues Gallery. So I will just plug the new show that we're doing. We are doing the Retro Rogues Mystery Show. And hopefully that is going to be coming out on Friday. That will be a pre-recorded show. And hopefully it'll be able to find an audience, and some of you folks will enjoy it. And so that tonight is going to have to be the last word.